Good morning. As India enters into a critical phase of the Wuhan virus, things seem to be getting out of control once again. And surprisingly or frighteningly enough, the Delhi government's orders seem to be getting more bizarre by the day. But we'll get to the Delhi government's orders in a minute. Let's look at the numbers first. So what happened was that, as the base grows, as the number of infections increase, the growth rate automatically starts slowing down, and that is what India was seeing. So we were far from the curve, from the curve dipping, but we were certainly seeing, the growth slowing down. What is happening now over the last 2-3 days is that the growth rates are once again picking up. So if we grow at these growth rates, things are going, the infection levels are going to surge. But first, let me just tell you what the growth rates were and what they've been in the last 1 or 2 days. Delhi's daily growth rate of infections had slowed down to around 6% from 6.7 to 6.8% a week ago. It's now back to 6.3%. Maharashtra was 6.5% 2 weeks ago. This had gone to about 3.4 to 3.5% levels, and it's now back up to 3.6%. India had slowed from 4.8 to 4.9% about a week ago to 4.4% levels, and this is up to 4.6% again. Now these look like very small numbers. I mean the growth rate, 0.1 or 0.2 is hardly much. But keep in mind that this is what is happening every day. So when you look at that over a period of a week or so, or 10 days or a month, it becomes a real lot. So essentially India is once again on the upward surge. So that's a problem here. So how are governments dealing with this? Obviously every government is doing its best to keep the infection down, but how Delhi and Bombay are doing it, and these are the sort of epicenters of the infection. How Delhi and Bombay are doing this is quite different. So essentially what Delhi and Bombay are doing is, let's just not test it. If you don't test it, you don't get new infections. So that's a good way to keep the infection down. So for example, we have a story which says that in Maharashtra, for example, let me just get that number right. Yes, in Maharashtra, the daily number, the daily testing was about 7237 on May 1, and that went up to 14,000 by the end of May. So it basically doubled in Maharashtra over May. But in Bombay, the tests remain at about 4,500 every day. In Delhi, similarly, we are seeing that while Delhi accounts for about 11 or 12% of the country's infections, it accounts for about 5% or so of the tests. So we clearly, both Delhi and Maharashtra, need to ramp up the testing, but for reasons best known to them, they're just not doing it. So that's an area which clearly needs to be looked at. And as a result of the infection levels or the growth in infections once again rising, India is now number 3. India is now number 3 in the world when it comes to fresh daily infections, Brazil and America being the first. So keep in mind, India was one of the first countries in the world to declare a lockdown so easily, so fast. I think we were at about 600 cases or something like that. I remember the Prime Minister telling us that in his speech. We were at about 600 cases when we declared the first lockdown, and now we are number 3 in the world when it comes to fresh daily infections. So that's clearly worrying here. So what about the Delhi government orders that I was talking about? So one order, for example, talks about the fact that basically it is the duty of the doctors to keep themselves safe. So there was one order which said that if a doctor gets a corona infection, the doctor needs to explain what exactly happened because we are supplying you enough PPE. So why are you getting an infection? Now that was so absurd because at that time things were even worse. Even now the hospitals, they don't get full amounts of PPE. So luckily there was a huge furor and the Delhi government kept that order in abeyance. I understand that the Maharashtra government made a similar order a couple of days ago, and then after there was a furor, the Maharashtra government has also kept it in abeyance. The Delhi government has come up with another order which basically says that if somebody goes to a hospital and they're not able to find a bed, then it is the hospital's job to find a bed for that person in another hospital. So, not only do doctors need to worry about taking care of patients, not only do they have to worry about the shortage of beds in the hospital, the shortage of equipment, the lack of PPE, they now have to keep a track on the beds in other hospitals. And saving grace is, at least so far, the government hasn't said that the hospital has to provide an ambulance. Maybe that's the next order. Then there is the order of Gangaram Hospital. So Gangaram Hospital was one of the laboratory in Gangaram Hospital was one of the laboratories that was pulled up by the Delhi government for testing asymptomatic people. We discussed this yesterday. And now Gangaram has been told to keep 80% of its beds for COVID patients. So here's the irony. You have corona, you go to Gangaram Hospital, and after you get treated, Gangaram cannot do a test on you to check whether you've actually recovered or not. That was the standard protocol in the earlier days, that once you had your treatment, they would do tests on you to figure out whether you recovered. But Gangaram cannot do those tests on its own patients. Maybe it will call somebody from another laboratory, maybe it just won't do them. And then Gangaram has 20% of its beds for normal patients. So people like, let's say, having cancer. So they come for chemotherapy. Now when you come for chemotherapy, it's critical that you don't have corona. But guess what? In Gangaram hospital, they can't check whether you've got corona. So you go to another laboratory somewhere else and ask them to do a test, wait for that report, and then go to Gangaram. So that's how absurd the Delhi government orders have been. There's another order of the Delhi government. It's sort of assumed that doctors are keeping patients in hospitals because they want to keep them. Doctors have great fun just keeping people in the hospital for no rhyme or reason. And this includes government hospitals. This is not even private hospitals they're talking about. So what the Delhi government has said is that you keep those hospitals only for serious COVID patients. If we find a patient with, limited symptoms or something like that, all hell will break loose. So, this is just, dadagiri, if you will, for the sake of doing it, that the Delhi government seems to be doing. It seems to be getting worse by the day, and I don't know what the solution is. At some point, I think doctors will get fed up. And if they weren't so public spirited, I think, doctors and nurses would just say, we can't handle this anymore. You don't give us proper equipment. Our service conditions are awful. To work in the PPE, in wearing PPE itself, for more than half an hour or an hour itself is an ordeal. So the doctors do work in all those conditions, and after that, the government treats them like criminals, and it keeps passing these absurd orders. So that's another, problem area. And what is worrying is that it's not just the Delhi government. The courts seem to be passing similar orders which make little sense. So we talked yesterday about how the courts are passing contradictory orders when it came to the waiver of interest rates on bank loans. The courts seem to feel that the banks must give an interest waiver on loans given to them. This is no business of the courts, but for some reason the courts decided that they wanted to get into it. And now the Supreme Court has told the central government that I'm giving you 15 days. Within those 15 days, I want all migrants back to their home states. So there is no appreciation at all as what are the logistics on the ground. What can the central government, do? So it is one thing for the court to entreat the government to do its best to get the migrants back home, but it's given them a 15-day deadline. And guess what? The Supreme Court has also given the state government 15 days to come up with a plan on how they plan to deal with migrants. So, are they going to give them jobs? How are they going to look after them? Fortunately, so far, the courts have not said that we are going to examine whether the plan is a good one or not. More on that later. Mukesh Bhutani on our Reddit page offers a sliver of hope, just a sliver, I'm afraid, of hope of how India is going to deal with the Google tax. But clearly it's becoming a big problem, and once again, I think the only hope is that India is able to convince the United States to come to the table and discuss what we have called, what we discussed yesterday, what is called base erosion and profit sharing. So essentially, you cannot have multinationals who work in another country but get a business in another country. So they can't be based in America and getting business in India without paying tax on it. That's clearly unfair. So we need to see how the Americans deal with that. Our lead edit is an interesting one because it's in a sense got to do with the HCQ controversy. So essentially, what had happened with the HCQ was that the WHO had stopped the trials based on an article in Lancet, which has since been withdrawn because it was found that the allegations that they'd made were baseless. But essentially, what our lead edit is saying is that while the government is talking about Ayush, and you find the Prime Minister, you find other people in the government saying that okay, use some Ayurvedic remedies to boost immunity and things like that. Our edit says, listen, there's no point talking about boosting immunity. As in the case of HCQ, prove that it works. So do some serious amount of clinical trials on major Ayurvedic drugs and prove to the world that these actually work. And this might seem to a lot of people it's just some idyllic situation. You can't do field trials of Ayurvedic drugs. But guess what? The Chinese have been doing a lot of R&D and a lot of field trials and publishing research on their drugs. In fact, the Chinese actually got a Nobel Prize in medicine for traditional Chinese medicine. So that's a level of work that can and should be done on Ayush. and we're imploring the government to do that. The most fun story, of course, is the Forbes list of celebrities and what they earn. From India, unfortunately, we just got one name out there, but we got one name, so that's the good news. It's Akshay Kumar, who's at number 52. So clearly, having a public conscience, actually seems to be helping. So Akshay Kumar, did Toilet Ek Prem Katha. He did the movie Padman. He's been the face of the government's campaign on COVID awareness. So having a public conscience and being a top paid star apparently can go together. So that's a good thought to have for the weekend. This is the beginning of the weekend. Kylie Jenner is number 1. She, as most of you would know, is Kim Kardashian's half sister. Kim, I think, is down at number 48 or something like that. But her husband, Kanye West, is at number 2. So there's a lot of money coming into the Kardashian family. And as I said, having a public conscience has served Akshay Kumar well. So with that, have a great weekend, and see you on Monday morning. Bye-bye.